You're welcome back. Time for business now. And Emmanuel Abuajiriafe joins me in the studio now. And speaking of business, you may have seen the Vice President, Kwesi Mr. Arthur, and Dr. Mahamadou Bawumia exchanging pleasantries. What do you think they could have been talking about?
For me, it's a high show of, maturity. And it shows that in politics, you really need to understand the game before you venture into it to play. Because for once, I was thinking that perhaps bumping into him for the first time after elections, he might have been asking him for the questions that he asked, the 170 questions, and the answers to that question.
The answers to the questions.
Exactly. But it was so impressive. I mean, the way they, engaged each other in a chat.
I guess it's a lesson for all of us.
It is.
Not to put our hearts and souls into these campaign rallies.
Exactly.
But what's coming up in business?
Well, in business, Chamber of Bulk Distributors are calling for stricter punishment for any company, fuel service stations, which flouts safety regulations to forestall occurrences like we just saw in our first story that you read.
All right.
Very unfortunate. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining me on business. The Chamber of Bulk Oil Distributors says one of the surest ways to minimize explosions at fuel stations is to deal rigorously with companies that breach safety regulations. About 7 persons are said to have lost their lives, with more than 20 others sustaining serious injuries following recent gas exploration at the Louis gas station at La in Accra. Speaking to Joy Business after presenting a total of about 4,000 Ghana cedis worth of items to victims, Chief Executive Officer of the Chamber, Senyor Hosi, said firms must be held accountable if found to be negligent in the discharge of their duties.
Industry is a petroleum industry, and for God's sake, petroleum industry is supposed to be possibly the epitome of safety standards. So when things like this happen, it calls for a great sense of concern, and that's a problem. What's going on wrong in this industry to allow things like this is a question that we should be asking and trying to find answers to resolve. But for me, I blame government. Government's attitude in holding people responsible is the problem. So increasingly, by government, I mean the whole apparatus, from MPA to the police to central government, the presidency, everybody in the chain. And look, when things happen like this things just don't happen, all right? You look at June 3, girl had valves, not well managed or whatever it is, whether it's a hatch, whatever you call it, and you allow so much diesel or petrol, whatever fuel, to be displaced from the underground tanks. I mean, it's not normal. That's a lapse in safety. All right, who's been held responsible there? None, nobody. Are we asked God to actually compensate the people? No, nothing. They will come and talk about somebody smoking cigarette. That's, with all due respect, it doesn't make sense. Have you seen it being a crime for anybody to smoke cigarette? Have you seen it being a crime for people to smoke cigarette and try and drop it inside water? It's not a crime, but it's against the rules for you to actually run a station and not manage basic safety procedure that will avoid the displacement of fuel from an underground tank. All right, now you have this thing to happen. Now gas explodes. Who lapsed? Hold the person responsible. Check, were inspectors doing their job? The sighting of the station, was it properly done? Was there a breach in the rules? Who picked it up? Whose job was it to pick it up? Hold people responsible and accountable. And when we do that, there will be close to no recurrence of these things, because people get their job done and we have a preventive posturing towards accidents, not a curative one. No matter the amount of money you give the people who we see burned there today, you may not restore the beauty of their face. You may not be able to restore the dignity that they seek. You may not be able to restore the esteem that they may be deprived of by virtue of what they are going to go through. These are people's lives. These are people's parents, people's children. It's unacceptable. It's totally unacceptable, George.
Meanwhile, the Chamber is looking at setting up a scholarship fund for those kids affected in the explosion. Now, moving on, 3 banks have emerged the best places to secure credits, according to the Bank of Ghana. Bank of Baroda, GCB Bank, and Fidelity jointly came up tops in the annual percentage rates released by the central bank. There's more in this report.
Annual percentage rates, APR, is based on interest charged on loans and credit advances as at November 30 ending. It showed that GCB and Bank of Baroda offered businesses in manufacturing, commerce and agriculture at an APR of between 22 to 28%, as well as those seeking loans for other credits. This is the actual rate you will pay on your loan when you turn to the Bank of Baroda. GCB also gave firms in this sector an APR of between 21 to 31%. Fidelity Bank stood out as the best when it comes to consumer credit. According to the Bank of Ghana, on the average, businesses and individuals are paying between 33 to 34% as interest on loans. The bank maintains that it hopes to use the regular publication of these rates to drive down interest rates.
And in another development, Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Abdul Nashiru Isahaku, has indicated stabilizing the cedi strongly against the dollar will be one of his major priorities for next year. The governor disclosed this when he shared his end-of-year message on the Super Morning Show. All right, so meanwhile, despite a ban on the sale and use of some firecrackers in the country, the business has been enjoying great patronage in previous years. However, some dealers Joy Business interacted with along the Osu Oxford Street, however, indicated the level of sales this year is rather low. Amelie Josu has more in this report.
One significant practice the Yuletide comes along with is the use of firecrackers. Many buyers can't do without the firing of these products, as to them, these signify the presence of the season as well as to usher out the year. As a result, dealers increase prices just to cash in on the situation. Despite the ban of some firecrackers, the business has not been too bad over the years. However, during an interaction with some of these traders along the popular Osu Oxford Street, they disclosed the business has experienced a downturn this year. The traders who refused to speak on tape indicated that, aside the wholesalers who were cashing in on the business, retailers of their kind haven't made much sales. They were still hopeful the trend will change by New Year's Eve, as well as prior to the handing over ceremony to inaugurate the incoming president. The firecrackers on display range from as low as 20 Ghana cedis to 2,500 Ghana cedis for a pack.
Still on the Yuletide, some parts of Accra witnessed a slowdown in business activities on Boxing Day holiday. A visit to the Oxford Street at Osu, as well as some other parts of the city, saw the absence of the normal brisk activity. The reason was obvious. People were cooling off and perhaps hanging out with their friends and relatives on Boxing Day. Joy Business reporter Kukua Apia has been combing around the town and has filed this report.
The streets are virtually empty and most shops were closed with the exception of a few small shops. The holidays are here and businesses seem to be on break. Some boutiques and fireworks vendors were also opened for business, perhaps to exhaust their stock before the year finally comes to a close. However, the usual traffic that characterizes the Oxford Street had slowed down. We then moved to Accra Newtown, and here the story was the same. My current location is Accra Newtown, which is usually noted for being one of the busiest parts of the city. But today it seems that traffic has slowed down. Also, business is not as brisk as it usually is. We've spoken to some residents and business people here, and they have expressed some disappointment in the way business has gone this year. And also some of them have said that they're spending their day with their families, which is why business has seemed to slow down here. We've also been to some parts of the city as well. We've been to Osu and Accra Central. We've also been to the airport area to see exactly how business is flowing and traffic is flowing as well. This is Kukwa Apia reporting for Joy Business.
And away from that, an entrepreneur in the local shoemaking industry, Yao Bema Ejapon has re-emphasized the need for government to provide the right framework for businesses to receive adequate funding to expand. Access to credit has persistently been a major setback to the development of the private sector, especially SMEs in the country. At the launch of the rebrand of Bema Shoes in Accra, Yao Bema, who is also the creative director of the company, urged government to pay extra attention to the needs of SMEs so they have the capacity to reduce the rate of unemployment in the country. He also urged financial institutions to make it more flexible and accessible for local businesses to obtain funding for their operations.
Berima Shoes, formerly known as E-Cash Shoes, has become well known in the shoemaking industry, attracting a huge customer base both in Ghana and beyond. From humble beginnings 11 years ago, the company has, through perseverance, evolved to become one of the outstanding brands in the country. The entrepreneur behind this entity, Yao Berima, is a JHS school dropout who defied all odds to pursue his ambition. He now makes shoes of all kinds and is poised to make a major impact globally in 2 years. At the launch of the rebrand from E-Cash to Berima Shoes, the guest speaker, who is also the Vice President of the National Association of Graduate Teachers, NAGRAT, Angel Kabonu, identified the absence of standards, lack of finance and appropriate education as an undermining factor to local businesses' ability to expand and become sustainable.
And that's all in business. Thank you very much for staying with us and keep enjoying the holidays. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji Riafi. Good evening.